Hello and welcome to episode 388 of the Crate and Crowbar. It is the 14th of December 2021. My name is Chris Thurston, and joining me this evening is Alex Wiltshire.
Hello.
And joining me this lunchtime is Tom Francis.
Hello.
The time zone bit. We all enjoyed that. This is going to be the last Crate and Crowbar of 2021. And so, as is tradition, we're gathered here, makes it sound like a funeral, to lay the year to rest, to do something of a kind of game of the year pod. However, where previously we would try and get everyone in a room for a kind of massive run through of all of the year's games, this year for a variety of scheduling reasons, including Tom Senior's microphone breaking half an hour ago, we've not been able to get a big crowd. And also, I think one thing we've all found is that it's been a relatively quiet year in some ways. And so what we're going to do is run through a bunch of personal and sort of collective highlights of the year, settle on a kind of traditional game of the year, but we're not going to do the full exhaustive. We get steadily more and more pissed while trying to remember why we put so many games on the list. Think might do half of that. We'll see. We'll see where we get. But before we get into it, I would be interested in sort of getting a sense of what both of your years were like from a video gaming point of view. Obviously, we can talk to you about specific games momentarily, but just like, what was your experience of games in the year 2021? Tom Francis.
I have been using them as a crutch quite heavily. I mean, always, but especially this year. And so games that have... I guess there's one that's like less healthy and one that I think is quite healthy. So the less healthy one is Slay the Spire, as always. That is my go-to comfort game. It's just this thing that's sort of endlessly appealing. I always fancy a run of Slay the Spire, and there's always this sense of promise that, like, oh, this time something really cool could happen, like, because and not false promise, because often it does. But I've never really got very good at it, like, despite playing it for many years, just like on the regular. And I think I don't want to. Like, I now know enough to kind of know what I need to work on if I want to get better at the game. But it's just more like focusing on all these different like counters ticking down and knowing more about enemy attack patterns and just getting way too deep into it where it would no longer be relaxing. And the role that game plays for me is just like, maybe I'm stressed, maybe I have insomnia, maybe there's something I'm trying to get my mind off, and I can just play Slay the Spire and it will absorb all of my attention but not demand too much of me, and I'll just have a fun time and be excited about cards. And then the other one, I said that was unhealthy. Actually, it sounds quite healthy now that I say it. And then the nice one is that Graham and I have started playing Supreme Commander again. Like, I just really had a craving to play it.
Oh, you actually did it? Oh, good.
And yeah, I just messaged him and to see if he wanted to play it together at some point, just co-op, so us against the AI. And we did it, and then we've been doing it every Sunday since, and it's just a really nice, like, way to reconnect. For listeners who don't know, I've moved countries since. In fact, I wasn't seeing Graham back in the UK anyway because he'd moved towns, and so now we talk to each other more than we used to. That's lovely.
Nice.
Also, get to crush loads of robots, which is a bonus.
Yeah,
and that game is just like, it never stops being a puzzle to figure out. It's so fucking complicated. Like, the economy, just getting your power and your mass to like not crash is this like lifelong pursuit. Like, we'll never truly master it, but we get better each time.
How about you, Alex?
Yeah, it's been a weird gaming year. I honestly thought I was starting to not really care about new games anymore because I don't know. I mean, I think that it's partly because there haven't been that many banner games because of COVID, I'm sure, has been a big part of all that. Watching a new generation of consoles coming in and then not really feeling any of the impact of that has also been strange to see. Sort of, is it really worth being interested in, sort of, or like, being as interested in that field? I get partly also my job has been, I've not been writing very much over this year because I've been spending most of the time working for Mojang and kind of thinking about books and things like that as part of that job there, that I just haven't had to play games in order to make a living, which is strange for me. And and that's all been quite odd, and that coincided with also, and I've spoken about it quite a few times on the pod over the year, but coincided with getting a sort of like a retro gaming system called the Mister, which has seen me actually spend lots more time playing around on that than my PC in particular. My PS4 hardly went on all year, but while sort of being faintly concerned that I'm kind of not interested in games anymore, if I actually totted up the amount of time I spent playing games over the year has probably been as high as any year, or maybe even higher, because I've been exploring genres of games which I never really knew before, like particularly, and again I was talked about this on the pod a bit, but shooter, like shoot 'em ups, Mushihime Sama, Dodonpachi, Hellfire, R-Type, Blazing Lasers, like it's a whole category of games that I've really, really enjoyed getting to start to get a sliver of understanding over. Like, I still don't know what makes a good shooter, but I think I've felt the appeal of a few good shooters, and I'm kind of intrigued to play more and more to figure out what that is and actually start to get. Well, I'll never be good at them, but not as bad at them. So that and now I look back at it, I think, yeah, that's been constructive, and it's been good to understand some of the games that sort of inform a lot of the stuff that I've written about over the years and years. So it's not been so bad. And I got a PS5 and I hardly play on it, but that's good.
Yeah, same. I feel really bad about it.
Yeah, same.
I'd worked so hard to get it. I was really it was really difficult to get hold of one. And I fought, and then I got it. And I don't think I'm going to buy Returnal because it's like 70 quid, and I don't know if I'm going to like it. And then eventually I got Deathloop on it, and that's, I think, all I've played on my PS5.
What about you, Chris?
So it's been a strange one, partly because the first half of this year, I'd say the first 5-6 months of this year lasted like 40 years. And then the last 6 months have taken 8 minutes. And so I have had a very strange, and that is wholly work related. That's wholly to do with when I have had a kind of a balanced schedule and when I've been very, very, very busy. And that has obviously affected the way I've played games. And actually, one thing that's manifested as I was putting together my kind of thoughts for this podcast was realizing there are things that I played this year that we'll get on to talk about that I had no idea were this year and that really could have come out years ago as far as I was concerned. And things I've played far more, in some cases, very recently. And then there's gulf of kind of unmapped time in the middle that I almost struggle to account for fully. And I think, one thing just to clarify is we're going to focus on games that came out in 2021 on this podcast, partly to thin the list. But I think, as we've all identified, a lot of what we've actually, spent time doing has been playing games that did not. And really, to be honest, the game that has sort of occupied the majority of my time in the last 3 or 4 months was Cyberpunk 2077, which I think in normal circumstances would have been probably the most significant gaming experience I had this year. I actually, so much so that I actually finished it this morning before work. Finally, 100 hours on the save. I think I've done every single thing in that game, short of buy all the cars. I know I've spoken about it on the pod, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I found that I really wanted and needed an immersive, narrative-driven game to sort of make my way through, and it very much fulfilled that. And I am now in that slightly verklempt post-big game sort of feeling of well, it's kind of over now. I was sort of pleased with the ending I got, albeit bittersweet. I respect that it's narrative, which I think is sort of this combination of very brash and fiercely intelligent and humane, which is a really weird combo. All the way to the end refuses to give you kind of easy solutions and traditional win states, and I think that's one of the reasons that it didn't necessarily get one of the that's probably the deepest down the rabbit hole reason why it got a poor reception. But it's one of the reasons that maybe people didn't come away feeling triumphant from its ending. But I really, really liked it all the way through. I got a new PC this year, as I mentioned at the time, and therefore was able to play the game with extremely minimal issues, by which I mean there were plenty, but nothing that really got in the way, and it loaded fast and it played well. And so that I think was like really a great escape in the second half of the year, particularly to I think genuinely one of the most extraordinary environments ever created for a game, and a huge technical achievement on behalf of the artists and engineers who made it happen that deserves to be called out despite the technical issues that the game has. And also I think like for me at least a pretty high watermark for like big budget video game storytelling and performance and writing generally. I think I think given the game that it gets unfavorably compared to because of I think some of its marketing is GTA, I think it really has like many like lessons to teach GTA in terms of like how to tell a crime story with heart and meaning, and so many things I really really respect about it. Like I'm so grateful to have a big sort of epic scope story game that isn't about saving the world at all. um and that feels so vanishingly rare, not just in games but in pop culture at the moment, to have a game that is entirely about the personal stakes of the people involved. And yes, you engage with some power players in the world, and you are fully capable of fully seeing that story through and only and leaving not a dent in the surface of the world that you've come into. And I didn't realize how refreshing that was until I was playing Cyberpunk, that has the confidence to just be like, this story is significant because it's significant to the characters that are experiencing it. At no point does ancient monolith need to rise out of the ground, someone say the precursors are back and now we have to do something about a huge beam, like and and so yeah, so I think like just to have said it, given that's going to be my spicy take, is that it's like in some ways Cyberpunk 2077 is probably the most like played the most significant role in my life for game this year.
Because of that like time warp
yeah.
thing that you mentioned, I have to ask, did Cyberpunk come out this year or last year?
It came out in December last year, I believe, or November,
Okay.
December last year. So unfortunately I can't include it in the list. But I played it last year, then realized my PC was not going to have a great time with it. I had a new PC on the way at the time, and then played it over the course of this year, really in like two batches, like April, May, and then X time passed for some reason. I accidentally pressed the kind of skip time button. And then I played it like, October, November, and then obviously till today. Such a shame that it didn't have the chance to be to get like, I don't know, just it's not a shame. It's there's some human agency involved in this as well, but genuinely a genuinely great game lurking under some over sort of, I guess, misaligned marketing and huge technical issues. But honestly, I think if you just fixed that first one, you'd have something fairly special, because traditionally I think people will forgive a lot in a game that gives them a meaningful story to engage with. In this, people forgive this of Bethesda all the time. They've traditionally forgiven it of these kinds of RPGs. And I liked it a great deal, and it's genuinely, in this, we live in the era of everyone loves Keanu Reeves, probably one of Keanu Reeves' best performances in anything. Genuinely, he is so good all the way to the end, and it is like a weirdly meaningful friendship you make with Keanu Reeves, my best friend Keanu Reeves, and he really has. He's carried me like a baby through the last couple of months this year.
Chris, did you try the that Unreal demo, Unreal 5 and
the Matrix demo thing?
Did you?
Not yet. No.
Whether that's influenced your relationship with Keanu?
Honestly, the weird thing is I'm quite excited for the new Matrix film, and then I saw that very funny clip from that Verge. Did you see the Verge interview he did, where he was mean? I think for the first time anyone's seen him be mean in a really long time. He was mean about NFTs, and as soon as he was mean about them, he giggled in this way I've never heard him like make a noise I've never heard him make, which is like, I've just his like, this is very silly and I've been mean about it, giggle, like hee 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 hee. And genuinely, it's one of the most like, he's a very endearing man anyway. He gives a very good impression of himself, and that was an extremely endearing moment.
I kind of forgot that he, like, the thing about him used to be how bad he was at acting. Like, that was the joke about Keanu. That's what he's known for. It's like, oh, he's in those huge movies, but he's terrible. And I learned recently that there's a Point Break like stage show in which the Keanu role is played by a random audience member each night to emulate how bad he is at acting.
Oh man, he doesn't deserve that, but he's probably like it
No.
because he's so
yeah,
nice.
yeah, you
Yeah.
find it's in the audience thinking, yeah, maybe they'll pick me.
It was probably his idea.
But he's genuinely good in Cyberpunk. I'll say that. So much so that I forgot it was him, and then occasionally I see real Keanu Reeves, and I go, "Oh, it's Johnny Silverhand." Anyway, enough about me. Let's get into it. Let's get talking about the games we put on the big list.
Hey, I'm wondering whether we start with Tom's. We actually did before
Yeah.
Tom's mic
Oh, good idea, yeah.
imploded. We've got a good link. We asked him for his suggestion.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, that's true. Like if I'm going to make a contrarian cyberpunk decision, then so can Tom Senior.
Yeah.
His game of the year was The Ascent.
Shall we all try and justify that for him?
Which we all went.
Having not played it.
He could hear us, but obviously we couldn't hear him as we tried to call into our pod system. And he typed out The Ascent, and we went, huh? Tom,
Those sounds of furious
Tom,
typing as we all Googled it.
both Tom and Chris Googled it. I had to Google it. I do remember it because it is on my long list. But we'll go into the absolute state of my long list. I did play it, and I played it happily for, I don't know, 4 hours, and it's fine. It's good. I never really progressed beyond the
We should say what it is.
Okay, it's a cyberpunk adventure.
I'm in.
Sort of played above you, almost. What's it called? Diablo-like.
Isometric camera angle.
Isometric. Thank you.
It's a play above you game.
It's a play above you game
where you are a little man.
Little man,
run and jump.
And
are you a single little person or are multiple little people?
You are a single little person. You play alone, and you can. It's twin stick kind of controls.
I love. So when you say you play alone, do you mean it's single player, or do you mean that
you might well have some? Thing is, this isn't my game. This is no.
But you're saying this like you've never described any game before.
I told you I hadn't played much this year. No, it probably has an online multiplayer thing. You know, where you play together over the wires. Do you know that thing?
There could be goals and themes and story, and you might press some buttons to make events happen.
Are there challenges
all the time? There's this constant imagery on my TV. It's amazing. It's very, very beautiful. It's incredibly it fucking looks amazing. And the camera, you're used to playing isometric games, and you assume that when the camera's going to sweep in, the level of detail kind of is revealed, and it's kind of looks like trash. This game, the camera zooms in, almost goes first person or over the shoulder, and the world looks as good as any third person game. And and I've seen various kind of screenshots and people exploring the world and revealing these incredible details that you'd never notice as you generally play. It's beautiful, and it's got these amazing vistas. It's a game in which you're on these massive skyscrapers, and as you're running across a gantry, the camera will move so that you can see gunships just sort of blowing each other up and shattering the facades of adjoining skyscrapers as you run along. It's just fuck. I've never seen this in a game like this. It's gorgeous. But it's a very kind of loot and shooty kind of design where you're constantly getting new trousers. I found it quite convoluted, the whole kind of gear system. I never really felt excited by the things I collected, but I did enjoy it, and then I stopped, and I'll probably go back to it a bit. And I've done Tom's Game of the Year choice an terrible injustice in my inability to describe it and my lack of enthusiasm about it. Sorry, Tom.
Well, I mean, he didn't seem mega attached to any of his choice.
What did he say? I think we've lost that chat entry. He did say it's indicative, basically paraphrasing him, it's indicative of this year that this is the game that I'm nominating Game of the Year.
Well, thank you I'm glad one of us played it, because I thought that would otherwise be wildly speculative.
That could have been fun in its own way, though.
Yeah, it could have been. Tom, a present Tom, why don't you tell us about Chicory?
Chicory, yeah. Chicory, A Colourful Tale, is a top-down game. It's not isometric. 2D about a dog painting a black and white world with a magic paintbrush. It's by
dogs.
the developers of Wandersong, which was a really lovely, wholesome game that sort of became somewhat well known for underperforming sales-wise. It was one of those things where like everybody who played it loved it, but it didn't sell very much. And then there's a kind of happy ending to that, because eventually over time it's just never stopped selling that kind of low level. And so now in total, it's actually been quite successful. And Chicory is a also incredibly wholesome game, but actually has some quite heavy themes to it. So you are a janitor for the wielder, who is someone of special status in this world, who wields the brush and basically adds color to the world. But the wielder is depressed, and you basically take the brush off her and go and start painting the world. And you sort of justify it to yourself as like, oh, I need to, someone's got to do it. But then it becomes a persistent question of like, wait, do I deserve this? Was I chosen to do this, or did I just steal the thing? And it became like, just a issue of practicality that I have this brush. And mechanically, that means you can paint on the screen anytime in a variety of different colors. And that's all persistent. It will stay painted the way you painted it. And then the puzzles revolve around kind of different types of plant life that will either grow when you paint them, or only grow if you like uncolor them, like erase them. Little like bugs that eat paint, and so wherever you paint, they'll run after it, like eating it up. Other elements that will kind of follow your paint, some that fear it. Using your paint to light up darkened rooms. Just a really long list of different ways that you being able to draw on the screen could like trigger different elements. And the puzzling's like pretty light. I wouldn't say that's the point of the game. Really, it's just like a lovely, wholesome story that then gets into some fairly dark territory about like self-worth and depression and judging yourself by your work. And I think it treads a really good line with that, where it's a constant theme. It takes a long time to resolve. And it sort of feels, I don't know, honest. And it's not too kind of pretentious about it. It doesn't feel unearned. It all feels like you really feel I believe it's written by Greg Lobnov, who also is the designer. And it feels like him telling you about his feelings. Like it's definitely like that, rides that thin line between the characters are saying this, but this feels like it's written by someone who has felt these things and worries about these things. And it gets into some stuff about like treating people badly when you're depressed and coming to terms with that and sort of facing it. There are boss fights. The only combat in the game is boss fights, and they are sort of fairly few and far between. They're generally pretty light, and you can skip them, which I think is great, because it's different enough to the challenge of the rest of the game that I think it's totally fair that you should be able to just skip them if it's not for you. But those tend to be sort of fighting a manifestation of somebody, like a character. You'll sort of fight their worst version of themselves, and in the middle of the boss fight, they'll be saying the kind of the darkest thoughts they're having about you or about themselves. And so it gets to dig into that kind of psychological territory in a really satisfying way. And it's just full of such gorgeous little touches. It's really made with a lot of like love and care. Greg has a very different philosophy than I do about this kind of stuff, where like I should mention, I guess, in spirit of full disclosure, Greg is a friend, and so is Alexis, the artist. But he will lavish care and attention and work into just the smallest moment. So there's one example I loved is you need to get a transit pass, and so you go and get your photo taken. And like any time in real life that you'd get this done, they tell you, okay, don't pull any funny expressions, don't pull any poses. And Chicory has a expression and pose system developed just for that one moment. Like, the one time you're asked not to pull a pose or an expression, there's a whole system for choosing a pose and an expression. It never comes up again. And then my favorite feature of the whole game, and I think it's just incredible, is the hint system, which is there are phone booths around the world, and anytime you're stuck, you can use a phone booth to phone your mum and ask her what she thinks you should do. And so it always says, you explain your whole situation to your mom, and then your mom will have some, for, whatever stage you're at the game, whatever quests you have complete or incomplete, she will have some helpful hints to just point you in the right direction. And then as she's talking, a little hand kind of reaches towards the phone from off camera, and she's like, "Oh, your dad wants to speak to you. He thinks he always has such specific advice." And so you get to choose whether you want to let your dad tell you exactly what to do, which just feels like a very well-observed parental relationship. Like, oh God, your dad's just going to spell it out for you because he loves to know he's right.
Oh God, that's too real for me. It's my style.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous game. It's also that there are some moments in it that are you really know a game is working when you find yourself sort of engaging in it more than you need to. So sometimes you're asked to draw something, like there's an art class, and because you're the wielder, everyone's really curious to see what you'll draw. And I sort of know rationally, like, the game is not going to be able to judge my art. Like, it can't actually know whether my art is any good or not. But that context, that story set up for it, and the game's general playfulness and wholesomeness and sort of love of art and everything just has me in the mode to, like, yeah, I'm really going to try here. I'm really going to draw the best thing I can. And actually, the game does try and judge it. Like, you'll get feedback, and it will mean something about what you've drawn. Like, obviously, it only has very rudimentary ways of doing that. But if you've drawn a single thing in the center, people will call it well focused or well balanced. Or if you've splashed color all over the canvas, it has a different feedback for that. But yeah, a lot of times throughout it, it sort of suggests that you engage with something. Like, Chicory is the name of the previous wielder. She's a sort of rabbit character. And at some point, she asks you to draw her. And I spent quite a long time trying to do the best portrait I could of Chicory. And I knew like that wouldn't matter at all, but it just kind of, the game had successfully, got me on its side enough that, like, I wanted to play into what it was asking of me and engage with it. And the line between it actually being able to judge that and you just doing it for your own sake is blurred. And I think that's lovely.
I'm trying to think of an equally kind of wholesome segue, and almost every other game on the list is about death. But Alex, you and I both included Valheim on our lists, and you like, that was, as soon as I realized that game was this year, something about this year clicked.
I know.
Into
I had
place
to check and then thought, oh, how did that happen? I'm sure it's been out for a long time. February,
I think, was Valheim, and I've been paying for a mostly empty Valheim server for 6 months without realizing I was doing that. I can't bring myself to close the Party Longhouse, as the server is known. But let's talk about, because I think this is like up in the category of like defining games of the year, and I suspect games I will think about when I remember which year this was in future. So Valheim sort of snuck out of not nowhere, but sort of left field to suddenly become everyone's favorite kind of open world survival building adventure game for a very intense amount of time, at least for myself and for my friends and for Pip. And then it sort of, for me at least, faded, and that seems to have fit alongside the fact that, and I actually admire this, its developers, and it was a product of a very, very small team, subsequently have very much taken their time with kind of meaningful updates to a game that's still in early access. Does that match your own experience of it, Alex?
Yeah, very much. I played it quite intensively for maybe about 3 or 4 weeks, and then I just had this setback. All my best gear was on I don't know. It was on a. Did I put it on a ship? Can you put stuff on a ship? I can't remember exactly what happened. Yeah, and then I was attacked offshore. I just progressed to the sort of the next area. I can't remember exactly. I've killed a boss, put myself, wanted to re-site my base, got attacked, died, and then just couldn't get back to my stuff without dying, because it just got dumped, in this kind of dangerous area. And I'd actually had quite a lot of fun staging attempts to retake it, but I died maybe 3 or 4 times, and then the spell broke, and I haven't been back since.
Mm.
And but I did keep thinking, like, why I don't really like survival games that much. And I was why is this one? Why do I like this so much? I think it's the atmosphere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think
Well,
it's the atmosphere.
I think there's a few things about, like, there's two layers to Valheim for me, because one thing is it feels like we sort of started with the negative here, like what caused you to drift away, did you drift away, etc. And actually, I would credit Valheim. We can get into, I think, specific successes, but more broadly with, like, I think, certainly all of my kind of biggest like co-op moments of the year were in Valheim. And I think I benefited very much from playing it on a server that I was, a permanent server that my friends could jump in and out of and kind of contribute to. And there was so, now they think about it, so many stories arising from that. Like, its boss fights are really cool, and they're especially cool when you're doing them with other people, and going through all of the prep involved in finding the boss, getting the resources you need, creating the little portal network to get you the stuff you need close enough to do it, then kind of embarking on this hunt together to bring this creature down, and then taking the trophy back to the stone circle and getting the buff. And in that context, actually, the corpse runs are a thing. Our server was me, Pip, and friend of pod, Paul Canavan, and me and Paul are just sweet, gentle, normal men who just simply want to build a longhouse, ideally the same longhouse over and over again. In my case, a kind of sort of quasi-historical sea fort that I can live in by myself and stare into the wind. In Paul's case, a kind of increasingly non-Euclidean kind of longhouse that he can't stop making, because I think maybe like he was cursed by a witch or something. Who knows? Then we were accompanied by the machine, Philippa War, who would simply kill everything in the world and bring back the spoils of her conquests. And occasionally she would die somehow in some far off corner of the world, and I would have to go into my sea fort and get the boat and sail out, and that was my job, was to, like,
like Valheim dad, like sort of,
yeah, I'm just going to pick you
just
up
got
and
herself
take you back.
stuck outside the club, and now I got to go to
Yeah.
an island to pick her up.
And then there was the time that we went off on a sea journey, and, like, particularly, like, before you've kind of mapped the world or discovered what its limitations are, there's so much magic in, like, the sea journeys, particularly, and heading off and finding the secrets and monsters and things to discover. And I remember a single maddening, like, I think it's like a flute on the soundtrack that kicks in the kind of in the sea theme that drives everyone insane. I don't think that's a feature, but it's a quality of the game. It's a quality it certainly possesses. And the time that we all went out to sea, and Paul clearly got bored, and he just jumped out on, like, a death mosquito infested hell island. And he was like, "I live here now." And I was like, "Do you want me to build you a portal so you can come home?" He's like, "No." And then literally a week later in real time, being like, "Can you pick me up?"
I don't like.
I don't know why I'm here.
I don't.
Actually,
like
that's not quite true. He was very stubborn about the whole thing. But all of those memories, like, there's so much fondness in them. And I think the only reason we kind of drifted away was really running out of things to do, like running out of new things to discover. Because as you're going through that process of discovering things, it felt very, very special. And I think that is a sort of testament to a big part of it is look and feel, as you say. Like, it has this kind of, like, quasi, it looks like you remember PS1 games looking, but they didn't look like that. And, like, that is very charming. It's very, it reminds me of, like, somewhere between a PS1 game and the first generation of 3D MMOs, like an EverQuest or an Asheron's Call or something like that, which is very kind of poignant kind of sort of nostalgic territory for me. And then the other side of it is, I think that its crafting and survival systems, particularly early, are very, very smart and get you to the good stuff relatively quickly. It doesn't bury the lead, and I think that's a great sort of thing for a game like this, where sometimes those kinds of, like, survival ladders or tech trees can be a bit of a test of patience, whereas actually Valheim kind of is interesting from the start. It escalates quickly, and then it keeps getting interesting. And it was exciting whenever Pip would return, having discovered metal or something like that. It would open up all these possibilities. And I think the magic of those games generally is not the threat of dying because you haven't got enough stuff. It's the sort of emergent potential of combining elements to solve problems you didn't know you would have one day. Like, Pip and I spent a long time taming a wolf because we wanted a wolf, and then we, and then I went through the rigmarole of walking it all the way back from where we tamed it, the little settlement that we built to tame it, all the way back to, because taming a wolf in Valheim means trapping it, like in some walls with a gate, feeding it, throwing food in for it, and it needs to stay in those walls for a certain amount of time before it will just be like, I'm tame now. But in that time, it will absolutely attack the doors and walls with everything it's got. So you need to be constantly, like, we built like a platform overlooking it where I could lean down with a repair hammer and repair the walls to prevent the dog from escaping. Eventually we did tame the dog, and I walked it all the way back across the landscape, like fleeing dragons and things like this, to get it all the way back to our house, where it was like I built it a castle basically that was better than anyone else's house for the precious dog. And then tragically that dog was killed in an accident, I think a giant related accident, while Pip was playing, and she felt terrible about it. And then the next time I came into the game, we had a kennel compound full of increasingly dozens and dozens and dozens of dogs, because if you have more than one, it turns out they make more dogs. And then we had this whole new game to play, which was about like exponential dog management. And those are the fun things about these games for me. Those sort of like natural problems that emerge from just like mixture of social dynamics. And
Did you have a Viking funeral for the dog?
No, because I think it would have exploded into meat in the manner of video game animals.
Well, what could be a more Viking funeral than that?
I mean, I hope that when I die, I fall over I go like, "Hurrah!" and then fall sideways onto the ground and then explode, and there's just like a Greg's chicken bake there.
So you see your meat as being chicken. Interesting.
Well, I guess you're right. That doesn't make sense. I was thinking about like what food would I dispense.
Well, Greg's don't do a human meat pasty.
That's true. And if they did, they'd only do it to appease the people who complained when they made that vegan sausage roll. Cannibals is what I'm saying. I guess I'm going there. Yeah, so that was. Did you play Valheim largely solo, Alex?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I was briefly on. I kind of lurked on the server that Pip was playing on with
PC Gamer pals, right?
PC Gamer people, yeah. And I I thought I would like be a ghost there and kind of haunt my way up the coast towards them and kind of leave weird artifacts and settlements behind. And then I got bored of
pretty
this
cool and normal
within a few like a day or so. So I played Ghost on my own. Yeah.
I wonder how many like real life hauntings we've missed out on because the ghost just kind of got bored of the project. They're not really noticing this weird shit I'm doing.
But so on my own, I was sort of enveloped very much in the atmosphere of the world, and just the first time you go into Barrow, incredibly atmospheric, and it's a short time, maybe your fourth or fifth visit, just as you're starting to get the equipment that's going to let you not be frightened of the skeletons you find inside. At that point, you start to understand that they're all fairly generated and they're on a fairly in a simplistic way, and they're all very, very similar. But up until that point, they're incredibly atmospheric. But once they do become a bit rote, my attention was invariably turned somewhere else. Like, holy shit, there are these little villages scattered all over this island that I started on, and they're all, I don't know, there's something about them, the way they sit in a clearing, or sometimes they're just by the edge of a forest, and the forest is one of the particularly dangerous ones, and so they're sort of last sort of point of civilization before kind of horrible things are. And there are these castles that you stumble across in these really quite dense forests, and it does a lot with quite simple building blocks. And I really love that about it. Yeah, like as you said, the crafting system really pulls things along really nicely. Yeah, and really delivers a sense of progress and a sense of kind of possibility, while also being actually quite easy to keep on top of, and yeah, no, not too much a sense of grinding. Like that sounds all really mechanical, because actually my experience of it was very like I'm in this world and I'm enveloped by it, and yeah, that's definitely why it's up on my list this year.
Nice. Another game that came out this year that I had no idea came out this year, but it featured on several of our lists, was Hitman 3, which was January 2021, if you can believe it.
Yeah, that was a weird head spin to realize that came out this year.
I
And
suppose it feels older because much of it is, right? Like it is.
yeah,
Yeah, it's the final part of a 3-part puzzle.
yeah, and it's like it's sort of boringly good. Like it's really good. It's one of the best games this year. It might be the best game this year for me. But all the reasons it's good are just the reasons that Hitman 2 was good and the Hitman 1 was good. You know, in this 2016 onwards series, in which they are more like seasons of a show than they are whole sequels. Like they are substantial enough to be a sequel, but they're not. They don't radically change the sort of format of it. And I think this one had a great time with it. And if it's moved forwards, it's in the sense of they've figured out how to blend their storytelling ambitions with their sandbox stuff now, and that used to be a terrible problem for Hitman. Like it was the pre 2016 ones all struggled with this. Blood Money was best at it just because it had less plot stuff. But every Hitman game that had plot stuff, the plot stuff ruined the sandbox. It was like, if it's doing plot, you're going to have a terrible time in the sandbox and you're not going to want to replay this level and it's going to be a shit one. And then finally with Hitman 3, they figured out a system whereby if they want to tell a story that takes place in a level that they also want you to replay, the story will be a kind of a bit tacked on to the start, that when you're playing through the campaign, you play through that and you have to, and it's got all the scripted stuff. You might have lost all your weapons. You might, have some restrictions to work with. There might be, dialogue going on during that. And then you sort of arrive at the main location, and then that's the sandbox. And then when you go and replay the level, you're just playing the sandbox and you skip all that story stuff. And that works really well. I'm not really that invested in the story stuff, and I would be happy for it to just go away entirely. But I don't want to, shit on it for the people who do enjoy it. And it's really nice that they found a way for those two things to coexist. And for me, it's really just another 5 big sandbox levels with a lot to figure out. They obviously did do some new stuff, like the Dartmoor level is a bit of a departure from previous games. How did you find that one, Chris?
I really enjoyed it. I think I had come, I'm casting my mind back, but like I had replayed Hitman 1, as in new Hitman 1, and played Hitman 2 for the first time in anticipation of this. So I was very primed for like 5 new experiences, please, right? And so I thought, I apart from maybe like arguably the finale mission, which doesn't really count, I didn't think there were any duds in this set. I think,
yeah,
unless I have literally forgotten the dud. And what I would say about the Dartmoor mission is, it was like, I don't think it's necessarily a brand new concept to do the murder mystery mission, or the mission where you can explore relatively freely, because if you do the right things, characters are expecting you to fill a particular role in the environment. Those feel like ideas that have been sort of dropped in and out of Hitman levels in different ways, but in such a concentrated form, I really found it very enjoyable. And I think it's a good example of how the new form of these Hitman levels, when I say new, I mean since 2016, work, where you do have these quite authored pathways through, and then the kind of open sandbox side of it interacts quite nicely with each other, because I feel like the Dartmoor level is really ripe for being pulled to either extreme, where you can almost, following the paths feels like momentarily playing a whodunit or an RPG, really. But finding ways to completely subvert that environment when you know what you're doing, then almost like feels like it almost breaks the world open even more than it does in a more traditionally open level. Does that make sense? Where it's like, I can assassinate someone in a completely bananas way here because I have God information now. I'm coming in here with, like, yeah.
That one, I actually didn't like it my first time through because I found it very restrictive. I just found it very difficult. I just couldn't get at the detective, and if you're not the detective, that level
Yeah.
kind of sucks. But then I started to like it a lot more when and this is a kind of arc I took with a lot of levels here, once I started to get competitive about it, because one of the great pleasures of Hitman for me is competing for the best scores on the levels, which is something I don't normally do in almost any other game. And it also feels like a clash with what I like about Hitman, which is, really freedom and open-endedness and being creative and trying weird shit. But actually, once my friends start saying, "Oh, I got Silent Assassin in 6 minutes," I'm like, "Fuck, I bet I can do 5 minutes." And it works because it's like a slow process of you can spend as long as you like exploring this level, trying different things, testing theories, saving and loading, um, finding out, just discovering little opportunities and little cheats and tricks and stuff. And then you do this one run. It's actually a lot like Teardown, which is, I talked about this last year. That format of having as long as you like to plan the heist and then having one timed run where the stakes feel high, but actually if you do screw it up, you can just load again and try it again. That's a really good fit for me. And Hitman levels, actually, it's surprising how well that works. Like I actually can get really into the competitive side of it, and it doesn't feel stressful. And Dartmoor was one where I thought, oh, this is going to suck for this because it's so prescriptive. It's all kind of on rails. And then actually, once you get into it, it's one of the more interesting ones to do because you, like you say, you have such extreme knowledge of what's going to happen, and depending on your starting location, you can get right into the heart of things from the off and pull off some really impressive stuff. I also, now that I think about it, Berlin, is it the Germany one?
The nightclub one
is also a new twist on the Hitman mission where there's a large number of targets and you only have to kill, is it 5 of them or something?
Yeah.
So it's up to you who the targets are, which is a cool thing. And that's another one where I didn't like it the first time through, and then when I started to get competitive about it, I really, really liked it. That's one of the most interesting one to optimize because you have so much freedom there to figure out, not just how do I kill these targets, but even which targets am I going to kill. And I figured out a nice system that meant I didn't have to go into the club at all because the club I find just a navigation nightmare and very awkward to try and get away with anything because it's so crowded, and I much prefer the big open spaces. And yeah, I figured out a certain set of 5 targets that I can do all from outside, and figuring out, getting close to a good strategy, and realizing it doesn't quite work because of this guy, and then thinking, maybe I just don't kill that guy. Maybe I just pick a different target and find a way to do that. That was really satisfying.
I think you were right. Like, I found it fascinating when you said that it's like almost boringly good in that, like in this list. But it's funny digging back into it. It's that is because it's really good. And I think Hitman is probably. I think I remember saying this close to the time where it's like almost snuck up on me over the course of all 3 releases that like that Hitman package now is just quietly one of the best stealth games ever made. I think. And I say quietly because I think it didn't have huge expectations to live up to when it came out, and then it just kept being good and kept getting better, and the levels got more interesting, and it sort of has now become this very generous kind of span of things, very competently put together with high production values and refined systems and so on. I find that a sort of like an interesting thing to kind of consider because like it is. It feels like one of the best balanced, like big budget games, AAA games I can think of in recent years, between having meaningful production values, some cinematic aspirations, very deep mechanics, longevity, like all of these different qualities that don't always sit very easily next to each other, even just within the context of like third person action games, right? And it does seem like it just sort of succeeds at all of the things it sets out to do, which is a rare thing for any game to achieve.
Yeah.
But that I think is what boring success looks like. While also being a genuinely big achievement and a really amazing thing.
It's funny because so I think it's also been increasingly successful. Like I think that Hitman 2016 kind of struggled because it was a weird proposition. It was like they were selling it episodically originally, and then
Yeah.
there was also like a full pack you could buy, but I think some of them the levels weren't done yet and stuff like that. And they kind of reversed all that with Hitman 2 and let you just buy the whole thing. And it's interesting because I think there were definitely people when 2016 came out who thought the number of levels was paltry because they were trying a new thing, which is like a level is not a level, it's a destination, and within that there will be loads of different missions and loads of different ways to reuse that location. And they just really lent into this idea that a level is highly replayable and very open-ended and not specific to what you're doing there this one time. And I think, for me and a lot of people, that's been really successful, and I'm very happy to have 5 big locations in which lots of different things are doable and interesting. But there are some people saying, oh my god, it's only 4 levels or only 5 levels or something. That's pathetic. But now that there's been 3 whole games, they actually have what they asked for, which is like now there's like 15 or 16 of these like massive levels all in one game that also has all the depth and replayability that they were focusing on in the first place.
Yeah, it's a really good game, and I'm not sure what else to say about it. We should,
Yeah.
Alex, I'm going to apologize. I was going to pass you, but I realized we should talk about a game that segues really naturally from Hitman, which is the year's other run-based Hitman game, basically, which is Deathloop, which I appreciate. I've never talked about on the pod actually since finishing it, but it did appear on both of our lists, I think, Tom. So, yeah. Let's talk about Deathloop.
I'm going to try and not do the thing I've done on almost every GOTY podcast. I mean, I'll definitely do this to some extent, but with Deathloop, I'll try not to just be arguing against it because I've done that before where like even just my own list, my own personal picks, I'll just argue against each one of like, here's why it's not the best game of the year. And yeah, you definitely got a lot more out of this than I did. I think all of my sort of issues were kind of around like on paper, this should be my favorite game, certainly of this year, and one of my favorite games of all time because it's Arcane and I love them and they're doing a sort of more straight kind of Hitman sort of thing. And I love it's kind of information game. You're gathering information about stuff. And so all of my criticisms are kind of like coming from a place of like, why isn't this my favorite game of all time? But yeah, it is a game about gathering information about a complex, situation that is unfolding on a time loop that you can replay and dig into. And that process was really satisfying. I really enjoyed trying to puzzle out the mysteries, and along the way you get to like take things out of the loop kind of thing. Like normally you're replaying these correct me if I'm wrong, is it 4 time periods and how many areas?
Yes,
4 areas,
also 4.
Yeah, that makes sense because you have to
5.
do I think don't you have to do all of them in the final run?
You
maybe
don't have to do all of them in the final run.
A lot of podcast voice.
Yeah, sorry. The final. Yeah, it would be easier if I say it out loud, but I also don't want to spoil it for people.
Yeah, of course.
I'm just going to think it through, but I think maybe you do. But yes,
not a huge number of different areas.
Yeah.
And yeah, normally you're dying and resetting, and you're back to starting the same way you started the first time, except that you can gather this resource that lets you sort of kind of buy things to keep, like some of the stuff you had in that run. You can sort of pay some residuum to have it permanently unlocked. And yeah, coming up with the right build of powers and passives and weapons and stuff that was suited my playstyle and was satisfying. That was a really fun process as well. And it did feel personal. I mean, a lot of my choices felt inevitable in the sense that like I can't make a different decision to this. I have to have Blink. I have to have this. I have to have that. But I think a lot of that was personal to me. Not everyone, chose those same things.
I think I said this when we were playing it, but because I think I played it a little bit later than everyone else, and I sort of missed it on the pod. But I had a really good time with Deathloop. But I was very aware as I was playing it that like I was almost running past its issues on the way to have the time I wanted to have with it, if that made sense. And I had, and you and I have actually not spoken about it until this moment, I suppose.
Until now.
But I had this constant feeling like I was like, well, Tom wouldn't like that, but I do. And I just keep going.
Almost like a telltale thing of like, Tom will remember this.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But it was almost like, yeah, I could see your playthrough and like I was just going along. And so I'll try and break that down because I think it's a mixture of good and mixed in terms of like why I had a good experience of it. One is that, and to focus on the positive, I feel like I think I may have said this when I finished the game to you guys. I felt like I was very specifically in the Venn diagram of people this game was for, where obviously I love Dishonored, I love Arcane's games, but really my love of their games is really rooted in Dark Messiah. and in the kind of like mad action spectacle games they can make as well. Not just the stealth immersive sim stuff, but the kind of very fast, in that game swordplay and kicking, in this game gunplay and magic powers and kicking, kind of play that kind of takes advantage of your mastery of environments and mixes it with really fluid movement and fast kind of shooting and that kind of fun, that I've always liked. And I like, and Dishonored also does this. Dishonored, one of its strengths is that it offers this as part of a package that also includes really deep and meaningful stealth, where I think Deathloop is legitimately weaker. But I like that. I was kind of primed for that. The other side of it is that I also am a huge fan of weird PvP. And so I played through the whole game with the PvP flag very much on. And, for me, those invasions and things created moments of really interesting, exciting tension throughout the experience. And like one of the best experiences I had in the game this year was, I knew in my heart of hearts that I was going to get invaded by a Juliana, effectively, your player controlled rival assassin who can take you out of the game, on the final map of the final run. I knew it was going to happen. And that map is one that at that point I knew really well. And I knew, and I think one of the great things about its multiplayer system is it encourages two sets of awareness of the map. One is how the mission works, all of the NPC details, how the game is set up, all the mechanics and that kind of thing. And the other is how you play it as an invader, and therefore how to circumvent an invader. Like it's a second layer of information. And that map I felt very confident about. Like I kind of know what most Julianas do on this one, and I kind of knew how to quickly get basically behind where most Julianas would wait and camp. And I wasn't initially right, but I just had a sense like I'm just going to wait in this particular part of the map, and I'm going to take this very slowly, because in this sense, getting rid of Juliana is more important to me than my targets, because that is a known quantity at this point. I know what I'm doing, and it was one of the first times I ever actually managed to stealth take down Juliana, which is a really good feeling, because it's like there's doing that to an NPC that you've kind of lured into a particular trap, but managing to pull it off on another player feels amazing. Particularly when it comes from some of the same calculations, right? Like it's just that the form that your distractions take, your kind of mind games take, are slightly different, and that felt genuinely great. I have some very frustrating experiences with the evasion system as well. But I think for me, it genuinely added something to the game. But I can also see why for other people it would be a distraction or a kind of bolt on.
Yeah, I didn't get along with it because I was playing on PS5 and playing on a gamepad. I'm not very good at FPSs on gamepad, and especially about aiming. And I tried some of the stuff you're talking about, and I liked the mental challenge of engaging with, like, okay, if a player is going to sneak up on me, where are they going to come from? And I'm all about hacking turrets. So I was just, how do I set up my turret death trap so that they walk into this? And that was cool, but it didn't entirely solve the problem. It still came down to a gunfight, and in a gunfight, I always lose. And so I'm not very good at controllers. I also found, just as an aside, the thumbstick like aiming calibration in this game to be really bad, like the worst. I thought just the PS5 controller was like broken or shit or something, but it turns out to be fine in every other game. And I've heard other people say the same, that the response was very inconsistent. Like I'll keep the stick in the same position, it'll do nothing at first, and then it'll suddenly lurch really suddenly. So like actually aiming in a real-time situation was impossible. So that side of the game, I just had to turn it off because it was too frustrating to lose every gunfight.
Yeah, I can see that. I also was on PC where it felt fine for a lot of that stuff. The other thing I would say about it as well is, like, I think because of the way it encourages you to play, you have a lot of like lost runs or things that are just exploratory or very scrappy solutions that don't matter because the loop will reset. And for me, I'm such a perfectionist in these games most of the time that I felt very liberated from that. Like literally, if they had released Dishonored 3, which interestingly Deathloop was originally kind of conceived as, then I almost feel like as of when it came out, I wouldn't have had like the mental energy to really commit to a really good Dishonored run, if that makes sense. But I did have the mental energy to kind of blunder my way through a series of like, crap. The experience I've just described of like having all that experience coalesce into a moment where I could exert some amount of mastery. was very, very satisfying. But a lot of the game for me was like almost like kind of throwaway in a way that I actually needed. I think like I needed a game that, you know, I find, for example, I find playing just to compare it to the game we were just talking about, I find playing Hitman scrappily not that fun. Right?
Yeah,
Like
definitely.
you get into a gunfight and it's like, ah, fuck, I'm just gonna load a save because what I want to do
Yeah.
is not this.
If anyone but me
Whereas,
fires a
yeah.
gun, it's over.
I am the only gunman. That's what they really should call it. Like, and whereas with Deathloop, I was like, well, the worst this will get is it'll turn into a fun shooter, right? And I will play that until I die. And in that context as well, the kind of peppering of these PvP encounters, the fact that you can always get something out of an experience, whether it's a piece of loot or power up or something to carry forward with you, or a piece of information or a better understanding of the route. Like, I think its peaks aren't as high as the best of Dishonored, which I should stress are like some of my favorite games ever. So that's not, you know, a bad thing necessarily. But I also found that it's sort of nadirs as an experience overall were never that low for me. Like I was very consistently having a fun, even if occasionally it was like, well, I fucked this up. Time to just kill everyone and run away.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so interesting because there's like my friend Nels has very much the same perspective as you, where I felt it liberating that you can't quick save and you can't quick load and stuff. And
yeah,
I have the opposite response, which is if I can quick save and quick load, I'm liberated because I can try whatever I want. It doesn't matter. I'll just load the save. And so I'll take the wacky power and I'll take the weird combination and I'll just play with it for a while and then I'll load my save and I'll do the real run. Whereas in this, so much was at stake each time. You know, I mean, not every time, but some runs, you're like, the stakes are too high. I can't afford to experiment here. I have to stick with my good powers that I know work. Because if I don't, I'll lose all this stuff I've gathered. I'm carrying so much stuff that I haven't saved, and I have to survive to save it.
yeah. I do agree for what it's worth. That I think there's there's a moment in the middle of the game where you experiment, where like the experimentation bandwidth is at its widest because it starts narrow and it ends narrow. And I think once it starts to narrow, it never really opens up again, right? Like once you have your way of playing, it kind of settles in. I didn't find that unsatisfying, but I think that was also partly because I was like, I finished the game and I moved on from it, right? Like I didn't go back to it to an experiment. And I think you could call those things out as weaknesses, but I also was like, I had a good time for the, how many hours was it? Let's literally find out. For the 15 hours it took me to finish Deathloop, like it was, you know, a consistently good time. It looks great. Like I really enjoyed the story and the performances, and therefore it's, for me it's like, I think maybe it's reasonable to want more from Arcane in some ways, but I was like, this is like among the best, or if not the best, single player shooter I played this year, I think.
Cool. Yeah, for me, like I was definitely it's definitely got its hooks into me. I played it like, you know, it was all of my gaming time from the moment that I first played it to when I'd completely finished it. And I played it like every night. So I was definitely super into it. And I was just sort of obsessing as much over its appeals as I was over the things that weren't working for me.
Awesome. Alex, I've neglected you for too long.
I was because I did play Deathloop, but not enough to put it on the list. Like I just don't know it well enough because I kind of found it a bit overwhelming. I just hadn't really got a finger on it under it yet. But I just want to say that I do like it, and I want to put more time into it.
Yeah, I think if people missed it, it feels like one of those games that it's just going to sit there quietly being good forever now. You know what I mean? Like the sort of, I think maybe if the player population dips, then that will take some of the fun at the multiplayer side. But maybe a good holiday break game, actually, if you haven't played it.
Maybe that's the thing.
Thoroughly. Tell me and us, Alex, about Metroid Dread. Let's actually put a console game in here. We can do that now.
Look, we can. We're allowed. We're totally allowed. Yeah. I'm going to say quite a lot of sort of negative things about it because
cool.
The more we get,
Hooray!
We're
it's
good
right
at
up there. No, this I've loved the Metroid series for a very long time, like many people have, and I've really enjoyed the 2D games. Recently, I've been playing Fusion, which is actually the game that. The story before this one, prequel.
Yeah,
but
Fusion came out like
released
20
first, so it's not a
when did
prequel, is it?
Hang
What
on.
would it be?
what? Hang on, hang
Predecessor.
on. So,
Predecessor.
so
Thank you, Tom.
isn't this game set after Fusion?
It's yeah. So
So
Fusion is the predecessor.
yeah, and that came up chronologically before. So isn't this the normal way things work?
It is just the normal way. We're struggling
Yeah.
because the outlier way is to like it's the prequel, right? And that's how
Mm.
everyone talks about it. So when you actually talk about the normal way, I was caught off guard. Anyway, I
It's
like the
gold.
2D games, and
Uh-huh.
and I was it was so I just had to get it. And the very first few minutes of playing it, it's just sort of this is one of the most lovely games to control in the basic movements of recent times for me, or maybe ever. There is something about its sense of responsiveness and the fidelity of its animation and the way that it responds to your inputs. Just the way that Samus will put a hand up on a wall as when you kind of hit it, run into it. It just feels great, and I loved it from the very first moment. As a result, there's a really good YouTube video by an animator that digs into the animation system, kind of trying to figure out how it works, just how much procedural kind of IK stuff in there, how much of it is baked animation, and how, despite the animations being really detailed, and how it remains feeling really snappy, because it looks like she is melding between animations, because you got from a slide into a jump, but you never feel loss of control. Samus's moveset is really good. One of the new things to this one is that she has a slide, so your momentum rarely drops, or if you can feel really skillful if you can maintain your momentum, because by and large there's a way of doing it, as you're wall jumping, sliding underneath low hanging bits, and it's really good for that. And that to a large extent makes up for an adventure which is very linear. Metroid is famous, if not synonymous, with non-linear 2D adventuring, and but if you go back to Metroid Fusion was actually pretty linear.
Yeah, it was also
Metroid
pretty linear.
Fusion would have you go to these points where a computer man would tell you where to go next, and you would go there, and then the next bit would open up. But in between those bits, you'd have an area which you felt quite a lot of freedom to explore. I think actually that freedom is quite cleverly curtailed. I don't think it's as cleverly curtailed in Dread. I think that for a multitude of reasons, and I haven't completely figured out why it feels so curtailed, but I think it's a combination of the fact that the world doesn't feel that much like a world. You're meant to be on a planet. You're meant to be exploring ancient ruins, kind of industrial sort of buildings, mining bits with all lava, icy bits, laboratories, those sorts of things, which are kind of the sorts of things you encounter and explore in Metroid games. In this one, they just feel like they're slapped in there, and it doesn't help that you're constantly using these transportation kind of points to go between the different sort of biomes, different areas, and the way that the game pinballs you between them, you just never get a sense of any kind of geography of this world and how things work together. Fusion, you're on a space station, and it kind of makes sense. And you're kind of like got these different areas, which are bound together by a kind of an elevator system. And so it makes sense that you would go to the main elevator, you'd go up, choose another way to go down to a different biome. But there isn't that sense of cohesion in Dread at all. The big thing about Dread is the fact that you're constantly being hunted as well, by what are called Ennies, which are these meant to be friendly robots, but they've gone bad. They've gone bad, and they're
Oh
hunting
no.
you. The way they move is just incredible. They kind of slink and kind of rotate their way around ceilings. They can actually walk on the ceilings, and they'll kind of, their body parts will kind of rotate to follow the contours of whatever they're walking on in these incredibly convoluted looking ways, which look somehow also very sinuous and organic and very uncanny. Really, it's a really good enemy, and they are quite discomforting, and they are very, very lethal as well, because if you touch them, they will kind of well, you'll get this little cutscene in which you've got a very small window in which you might be able to parry their attack, but by and large you won't be able to, and then it's game over. I've seen the game over screen many times in this game. The sequences where they're hunting you down are very telegraphed. Like there is exactly the environment in which they'll be hunting you. They make this sort of like little sort of noise as they're hunting you as well. The atmosphere, like it's got this sort of icy atmosphere, sort of hits the area that you're in, and it's very clear when you're nearby them. And the way they move around and the way they hunt you and the way that you can evade them is interesting, and I've enjoyed it. But it's very staccato. Like I think for me, Metroid games and Metroidvania games in general excel when I can enjoy a sense of flowing freedom, of kind of uninterrupted exploration, and then going back to earlier areas and feeling more powerful and wanting to investigate that place because I've got a new skill now, and maybe I can use it there to access that thing that seemed out of reach beforehand. Like there's when it's at its best for me, that feeling is an unfettered. And in Metroid Dread, the combination of the fact that the world doesn't really make sense, the fact that it's so linear, and it's very good at closing off spaces to keep you on that linear route, because you've gone down a one-way corridor, you've fallen down a hole and you can't get back up again, so the only way is forward. Like techniques like that, and the fact that you're being hunted during certain sequences, it really dents that enjoyment for me. The bosses too, they look beautiful, they're exciting, and they are fucking hard. They're the sorts of bosses where you complete a phase of it, like, and the first time you encounter it, it looks impossible, and the second time, you kind of do it badly, but you kind of like, I got through that bit, and then you realize, oh shit, that was just phase one. And one of those phases then will end with a little kind of QTE kind of sequence, which you then fuck up, and then you've got to go back to the main thing. They can feel quite brutalizing. However, you do learn these bosses, and I've found myself getting that sort of sense of mastery from not feeling I can do it at all to being able to do it, which is kind of interesting. But it's funny, Dread is on my list because I love the series, and I love the atmosphere, and I love the sense of movement in this particular game. But there's a lot for me that is wrong with it, and that's kind of it's a funny one, and it's up here nonetheless. I think it's a good game. It's just not the greatest Metroid game, but that still makes it up there in this year 2021.
Guarded praise indeed. Sorry, go on. Yeah.
Do you think I should play it, Alex?
No, you'd hate it.
Okay.
I don't
Fair
think
enough.
you'd like it. I think that you'd feel railroaded, and for the challenge to be unfair, like, I don't know, why does it feel unfair? I think it's because you feel railroaded all the time. Like, I didn't choose for this, fuck, I don't want this, and you don't sort of feel, right, I'm going to face that thing now. I'm gonna fucking do it, because you can't go back and do something else while you're kind of ratcheting yourself up to face the thing that's coming. In this one, well, I can't go back, so that all I can do is face that fucking bastard boss, or that enemy, which I don't really want to do right now. Still good though.
Game of the year. We should Alex, we should bounce off this briefly into a different game about a person who doesn't leave a suit, kicking
Had a feeling I
aliens
knew what this was going to be.
in the nuts. So actually, we were originally planning to record this year's kind of Game of the Year podcast last week, and I was I was ill, so we couldn't.
He
I
was
can also
ick. We
talk. I was
couldn't.
ick. I felt ick. I felt icknopod. Icknopod. But what that did mean is that it gave us a week to actually play Halo Infinite, which I think is on both of our lists, Alex and I, because it seems really good. I haven't finished it yet, so it's a bit of a kind of cursory include, but I didn't want to not talk about it because it's sort of plonked. I'm having a time of it apparently. Sort of into the end of the year as and immediately I think impressed me. Obviously, you know, this story goes back a few weeks to the surprise release of its multiplayer component, which is awesome. You know, I talked about it previously on the pod, like really fantastic resurrection of a lot of what makes Halo multiplayer great. Missing some stuff, and with one of the worst sets of unforced errors in a progression system I've ever seen. But nonetheless, the game itself is great, and we talked about, you know, that there has to be enough sometimes, you know, to make a great game. And I've been playing the campaign, and I'm really really enjoying it. Primarily because, you know, I didn't expect Halo. I mean, I knew that it sort of said that this was going to be an open world Halo. I didn't really know what that would necessarily mean, but it is, I think, it's refreshing that they have leaned so heavily into what I believe has always made Halo special, which is that the fundamental building blocks of Halo are really, 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 really good. Weapon set is really good. The fundamental kind of logic of swapping weapons is great. The you know, and seeing your enemies both as enemies to defeat and big dogs to woof, and
I'm just going to deal with the dog. You keep talking.
weapons to collect. Yeah, I'm just going to keep talking to Tom.
I'm listening.
And this, you know, the sandbox of it is extremely robust. The AI is great. Like it feels like we've gone through many decades of getting better at the sort of the presentation side of action games, and to some extent the smoke and mirror side of action games. And few series, I think, have meaningfully advanced what Halo set up in terms of pure mechanics. And I think the best thing about this game in the time that I've been playing it so far is that the open world structure is really an excuse to play with those mechanics in you know, in the way that, you know, Halo has always been a mix of like corridor action and then the occasional open area, and you would treat those open areas as pretty precious because they would be the ones where you'd carve 15 different ways of solving them out of the mechanics available. And Halo Infinite is all that. But to some extent, that is also a bit like having ice cream for dinner in that it, exactly. I assume every time the dog barks, it's because I made a great point that made sense.
He's very much, and he's very much
Yeah.
agreeing. Yeah.
It sort of, it can feel a little bit kind of light and ungrounded when you can approach any situation from any angle. And I've seen the criticism leveled at it that this sort of speaks to a lack of level design. I don't think that's necessarily the case at all. I think the encounters are clearly kind of, you know, set up in particular ways. But the freedom of approach I find really refreshing because it just rewards you for being creative. Like, you know, you can claim these forward operating bases as you progress. You get the options to pull down more wider and wider sets of vehicles and weapons. It has retained the Halo logic of if a friendly Marine is holding a gun and you want that gun, you give them the gun you're holding and you have their gun now. And this is just accepted within the, you know, UNSC army that at any time your commanding officer can come up to you and just swap what you're carrying with what they're carrying, like at any time. And this is obviously
Take this
like,
banana, Marine.
exactly. I guess I hold this up, and they will all willingly carry whatever weapon you want. And this means that you can turn it into a game if you like, where you equip whole little squads of Marines with weapons that you've chosen for them, pile them all into a warthog, and if you manage to not drive them off a cliff, then that's your little battle group, and you can play it in that way. And I find that really, really fun. The grappling hook is great. Like, it's such a natural addition to the series. It feels like it was always there. I think a lot of my enjoyment is stemming from the fact that I'm playing it on heroic, which is the second difficulty from the top, which is
Oh,
always
did
where
you? That's interesting. Yeah.
I always start. I
Yeah,
learned
me
this a long
too.
time ago. Always start Halo at heroic and then do legendary for the second run.
See,
Because Halo is
I
better when
do
it's
that
hard.
too, but for this one I went normal. I don't even remember why, because it's always been a point to go heroic, because heroic is really fun skill level in the early games anyway.
Yeah, and it is in this as well. Like, and I think heroic is what is preventing the relative openness of the new setting from feeling frictionless, because you can die really quickly if you fail to identify where the snipers are. You will
Yeah,
die real fast.
I would say that's
And
the same in normal actually.
yeah,
Yeah, like it will really punish you for overreaching. You know, as soon as you get surrounded, even if there aren't any snipers around, like it will be, you know, it will punish you.
So I'm playing on normal also, and it's my first Halo game since the original. And I'm surprised at, like, there's a bunch of stuff that where some modern contrivances have made its way into Halo, but then as far as I can tell, there's no grenade indicator, which is a very common feature of modern FPSs. And yet this is the one game where enemy grenades will fucking kill you. Like,
and they
I
throw
was
them
shocked
all
several
the time.
times.
And
Yeah, and
then
it's
what
just the little
happens?
guys
Why
can
do
throw
I
them
know
too, which
though?
I didn't know that.
well, what they do is they shout, "I'm throwing a grenade."
Yeah, it's very sound based. They say it. It's also very visible, because especially when the little grunts throw one, they'll be doing the plasma ones, and they glow very brightly, like white
Yeah,
blue.
I've got a lot better at it now, because like it just wasn't on my radar as a thing that a standard like low level enemy would do, is like drop a grenade at my feet.
I've been killed by so many grunts holding grenades over the years that I'm very nervous, very very nervous.
Yeah, I think there's a certain muscle memory there. It's an interesting call out though, because I think there are a lot of kind of like in a sandbox that's deep. There's a lot of kind of unforeseeable ways to die suddenly, occasionally. But as part of the fun of it is like trying to navigate the situations and make the best of them. How are you finding it, Tom? I'm really curious to see what you make of it as a kind of Far Cry fan and the other games that feel
Yeah,
as well.
I'm very early. I had no patience for the pre-open world stuff. I was like, "Fucking hell, get this over with, please!" Like, I think that's why I haven't played a Halo since Halo. Is I liked Halo all right, but anytime it was in corridors, I was just so bored of it. And so this is the game for me, I guess, because it's the open world one, and you get a grappling hook, which is I love. The grappling hook feels really nice. It's not sort of like, just the problem with grappling hooks is you need to design the whole game around them if you want them to be proper Tarzan swinging things, because you need a ceiling to swing from. And of course, this doesn't have that. So it's much more of a kind of climbing tool than it is a sort of big, cool swings. Although you can do some of those sometimes. But
Inexplicably,
the
you can
main
also
thing,
use it to arrest your fall.
Yeah.
If you
Yes.
fire it at the ground, you grapple slower than you fall. So if you fire it at the ground, you just it's a very rigid line or something. You just
I didn't know if Halo even has full damage.
It
But
does.
I
Early
I
games do.
instinctively did that anyway, just in case. I was like, well, there could be full damage in this game, and so just as a safety precaution, I'll grapple myself towards the ground, because that'll be safer. Like, what have video games done to me that I know this will work? But yeah, I think it's combined with a very good mantling affordance, where like if you're anywhere near a ledge, you'll be able to climb up it, and that makes it work really well just for like getting on top of stuff. So that's really nice.
Yeah, I was really surprised by how forgiving it is about letting you go up completely sheer, very, very high cliffs.
Yeah,
like,
it's great.
Yeah, actually, you're really floaty, so that you're basically flying up the thing, but with a bit of string. It's amazing.
I mean, so I'm early on, but for me, this doesn't compare favorably to Far Cry, just because the thing I get from a Far Cry game is it's a open world stealth game. So I'm approaching the outpost in stealth, and whether or not people have detected me is a key thing that's always on my mind, and I'm trying to do it in a very methodical, slow way in which no one detects me until it's too late. Like, it's over by the time anyone knows I'm there. And of course, this game is not built for that. And it's actually quite weird, I found, to have an open world game where, like, I don't really know what the stealth mechanics are, in terms of, you can sneak up on people sort of, but once people have aggroed, they kind of all know where you are, and it seems like they don't de-aggro for quite a long time. And in an open world, it's like,
quite a distance as well.
I'm just going to move countries. I'm just going to keep going. Like, I know you're all very, very mad, but honestly, I can move faster than you, so it's just not going to work out.
You are the chief. I think this is like the Halo thing. Like, if you know the chief doesn't really do stealth.
No, he's a big green man. I think like the reason I'm sort of hesitant about like shoving up into the kind of game of the year layer is I think for me it hasn't quite yet captured the sort of the I loved Halo, like, and I really did for a long time, and I think there's I'm really enjoying being back in that sandbox and playing with those various pieces. It feels great, which is the other thing I would say. Like the little kind of like drum hit when an enemy actually dies is great. Like
Yeah.
it's such a kind of consistently great reward loop. I think they've done a really good job with that. I think Halo previously also. I also, I will say I do like the corridor Halo because I think the fundamental mechanics of Halo are interesting, like breaking shields and like there's some of the muscle memory and like how to kill a jackal behind a shield, which is like just like with two shots, which is now like burned into my brain and my hands so much so that like I can kind of instinctively do it, and I find that very rewarding. But also, I think traditionally Halo has kind of benefited from a sense of urgency that comes from its two things really. Three things: environment, music, and narrative. Kind of working together, and there's some nice moments towards the beginning. Like they kick, it feels a bit like a Halo greatest hits in a way, and they kick you off straight away with an opportunity to flee an exploding spaceship while the music kicks in, which is like if you don't do that at least 3 times in a Halo game, I think you can refund it. But the last Halo game I played before this was 4. I skipped 5, as I think a lot of people did, and I feel like the other thing about Halo for me traditionally is like I was going to say it's one of it's up there with Mass Effect for me as like one of the most successful trilogies in the medium in terms of these kind of big blockbuster spectacles. Even though the original Halo trilogy is really 5 games. And I don't think it is sequelized especially well or in a way that kind of lends it the urgency it used to have. Like Halo is sort of is lightweight in some ways, but it is also the origin of the weird Destiny dichotomy or the very Bungie thing from back in the day of having extremely kind of light and occasionally wafer thin world building at the top level of the game, and then some inexplicably good sci-fi happening underneath the hood. And Destiny has kind of gotten better and better and better and stronger and stronger and stronger over time, up until its latest update, which is all about a magical horse, and I'm not joking. Whereas Halo, the new one, it feels like it's not comfortable going totally weird with it, but it's also not comfortable, this is the interesting about it. It feels very like a retread and an escalation, and one that sort of works and is sort of not working, and it sort of feels a bit kind of like I'm several hours into it now, and I'm still not really sure what it's about or why I'm there or what's going on. But in a sense that it's managed the trick of confusing me, but using only extremely familiar plot elements, which feels on one hand that's the sort of the one of the reasons. Whereas I think if it had stronger, this may be something Tom wouldn't care about at all, but I think if it had a stronger central narrative thrust to kind of power you through these opening kind of sequences, I think I would be kind of a bit giddier about it as a potential game of the year contender, because I think the rest of it's so strong. The other side of it, though, is like Halo used to have like modifiers you could switch on to enable like silly voice lines, and things like that. And they'd also do a load of Easter egg writing for Halo generally. As far as I can tell, Halo Infinite is just written with that by default.
Yeah.
In that it has more and sillier and wackier writing, and I really like a lot. A lot of it is very funny. Like there's a lot of very good one-liners in it, and a very detailed like conditional dialogue for like specific things happening, like you getting a headshot, an enemy throwing a grenade near a different grenade, an enemy of a different type dying near another enemy, like all of these different things. And I suspect the purpose of this, if it serves one other than just like bants, is it constantly keeps you in mind of the fact that you're fighting an enemy that's actually relatively smart for a shooter opponent, and therefore like the constant chatter is actually like a kind of keeps you in mind of the kind of supposed daft interiority of the little alien goblin men.
But that was always the case. Like that certainly existed in Halo 3, but it didn't have the whiplash kind of tonal kind of what the stakes were meant to be high. I'm saving this squad that I just listened to the millionth voice tape thing, audio recording, talking about their terrible experiences, and now the funny little alien guy's done a little squeaky voice and done a joke at me, and it's sort of whiplash over and over again. But like Halo 3, the tone was much more consistent, and
I think you're right,
it
actually.
did do that interiority. I think for me, I think it's because they know that you're going to be having so many more fights than this, because it's an open world and you're just constantly just getting into little scraps as on the way to other things, and it wants to keep you there, and it wants every battle to be kind of peppy and zappy and yay, fun. It wants to, it's really like, it doesn't really quite trust the 30 seconds of fun, thing.
I don't think it speaks to a lack of trust, but I think you're right that it is like a way of keeping that open world feel quite lively.
Yeah, I think that's what
Yeah.
it is.
I do, but I also do find that the tonal clash with the rest of the game is jarring at times. However, would I then advise that the chatter not be funny? No,
Yeah.
probably not. Like, I'm kind of glad that there's some, like, there are some good individual gags in there,
because you really don't want to be trapped in a room with John Halo, like that guy.
No.
He's a fucking
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, exactly.
The thought that struck me playing it was like, I feel like Halo is the game that non-gamers think all games are, where it's
Right,
like,
yeah.
it's got all the sort of jingoistic US military bullshit and a gruff protagonist who says, things like, the odds are unfair on them. Like, that's a line. Plus, it's got all the wibbly alien nonsense of just like magic crystals and little goblin guys and just all the tropiest stuff.
It's funny because, like, you're not wrong, but also I think Halo has always been sort of relatively tonally unique in its own way. Like, but I do think that the stuff they've added over time, and this is the problem of the sequels, is they've kind of diluted some of the original, like, sort of wonder of Halo, right?
That's something that Marsh pointed out, like on as we were chatting the other day. Like, I think I really totally agree with him. He was sort of saying, is it just because we're older now that I just don't find Halo Infinite, I don't feel the same sense of wonder anymore, and how he used to enjoy, like, the setup of the early original game, the earlier games was this multi-factional kind of sort of conflict where there were factions within the enemy, and I also found them really interesting. The fact that there were bad guys within that structure, which actually gave the opportunity to have allies within the Covenant, the baddies, who you could understand why they would be siding with you, and like that. I thought that was really well drawn, and I'm not getting any of that. It's early days, but I'm not getting any of that flavor at all here. Like, the enemies are they're just boring ape boys, like, okay, right?
Yeah. I think, and I think it's also the case that they didn't really know where to take their higher sort of sci-fi ideals after resolving them in Halo 3, really. And I hit a line recently, and I hope this isn't a spoiler, where someone literally said something like, "The Forerunners can't hide the secret of the precursors forever." And I was like, fuck, here we go.
But it's layers, and it's all those layers. That's like 5 games worth of layers. No, it's not even that. It's like, it's 5 games of main Halo, 2 of that strategy
post Halo.
Two
strategy games
thing, and like all layered on, like Forerunners, and they're like, oh shit, we need some even more Forerunners. We'll call them the precursors. But what came before them? Fuck.
Right. Well, it's also that, like, they've completely
Origin boys.
Like, they've completely devalued the word Forerunner. They really have. Like, it was always like sketchy that's how they would refer to themselves, but it was always in the context of an AI of theirs that was explaining it to you in the present, right? Where it kind of makes sense, right? These people were your Forerunners. That makes sense. to some extent, and now it's just like that's what they were called, I guess. Like the whole civilization
It's like
built around like we're going to be fucking meaningful in 10,000 years, boys.
it's like if we called World War One at the time. Like, boy, here we go on the first of these.
Maybe they were onto something. Honestly, like we live in an era of great uncertainty, great ecological uncertainty. Maybe we should start referring to ourselves as the Forerunners. Maybe that's the most optimistic, like it's the most optimistic stance you can take as a civilization, which is like, well, you know what, we're probably fucked. It's probably too late, but we can bury some cobalt blue stuff in the ground, and someone will invest that with meaning in the future. Like, make sure none of our doors or switches work in a logical way.
Put a puzzle behind everything that we build.
Yeah.
And record only 5 audio diaries.
Hey, and all of the biggest problems we have, why not, instead of destroying them, why don't we hide them in very conspicuous places?
I've seen the loading screens quite a lot because I die quite a lot in this, and like they point out some of the kind of the series sort of like things like there was I think it was an achievement in the original, or like one of the Halos, called Flawless Cowboy, which presumably, I don't know, you get through it without dying or something. I don't know what the fuck it was, but like Flawless Cowboy is a phrase which is burned into my memory, and it has such a flair to it that Halo used to have, which is really feels missing to this game. I think it's really fun. I've been really enjoying playing it. Like the you know, as you said, Chris, like the way you know, the gun feel and the whole mechanical thing is great, but there's no flair to it that might ever come up with calling some little fucking, you know, an achievement Flawless Cowboy. That's just totally missing. And like
there is a kind of Bungie
343
voice.
are just good at making games, and that's just all they are.
Yeah, and I think I think the humor is sort of very specific to, in many ways it feels more like Borderlands, right? Like I would say, and that's an interesting kind of axis.
But Borderlands
kind
is
of
at least
convergence.
supported by everything having that.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah,
we've talked about the
But-
tonal shift, but yeah.
But it's also an appropriate choice for a more open game, right? Where it being more perfect. I don't know. Maybe it takes you out of it more. I'm having fun with it.
I'm
yeah.
also.
I feel
more fun.
like
there was actually, I was going to say, have you? I just keep getting this this flavor of Metal Gear 5 constantly. Like the FOB thing was when it first kicked off, but like calling down stuff, you know, that you want from points, just the sense of being out in a big world, it feels so weirdly Metal Gear-y.
I get Breath of the Wild as well, actually.
Right, yeah.
I think it's partly the kind of the vertical approach and the sort of, you know, the fact that you're kind of traveling between these little camps.
Yeah.
Kind of unlocking stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
these are not
little
bad comparisons.
preset little kind of encounters that are designed as much as they can do, given that you can come at them from any angle. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it is good. I feel like what this podcast is becoming is like our caveats about the best games of 2021.
As always.
But I think maybe it's a final thing on Halo before we move on. Like, I said this about Hitman earlier. I think it is great to see a game that gets its value from meaningful mechanical depth and a real investment in systems as a driver of I can't escape. Like, I mean, you said earlier right at the beginning of the podcast that you don't play games for a living anymore, and neither do I. And I can feel dev brain creeping in here a bit, or producer brain creeping in. But like, I think getting longevity and variety and, dare I say, engagement out of like systemic depth is like the most honorable way for your AAA game to achieve that, right? Like, there are so many ways to, and it's very funny to me that this is in the shadow of such a colossal own goal of a more hostile engagement system. You know what I mean? Through the battle pass, that they succeeded at the thing most games don't succeed at, which is creating a game of sufficient mechanical depth that you want to play it and you want to unlock more options because that makes it more fun, but you're also glad that you're being drip fed stuff so it's not overwhelming. works beautifully. It's great. And then they fucked up the battle pass. But like that, I think is something I wanted to laud, because if this is, if this becomes the model for AAA stuff, that the way you get, because there's been stories already about the troubled development of this game, that the way you get a game's worth of content is just by building really strong fundamentals. I think it's a really good lesson, for the industry generally.
Yeah.
And something that I did want to praise it for before moving on to caveats about a different game. Tom, would you like to? This is a hard pivot, but there's really no way for this not to be a hard pivot. Halo is odd, but life is strange.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, John Halo's life is strange, and so is the life of Alex Chen, who is the protagonist of Life is Strange True Colors. Sorry. Two Colors is the 1-bit version. It was released in 1984. Yeah, this is a kind of a left field thing for me, in that it is one of my favorite games of the year. And like, I like Life is Strange. I like Life is Strange a lot. But this will get a little bit personal. I was having kind of a rough time a few months ago. And I tried to like get into a new game to kind of as an escape. Games are sometimes really good at taking your mind off things. And I bounced off so many. And then I tried Life is Strange True Colors, and it just kind of clicked straight away. And it's set in a town in Colorado, a sort of sleepy town, a very small town, and you are arriving there for the first time to stay with your brother, who is sort of well integrated there, and you are the new kid in town. But your brother is extremely welcoming and nice. It's got the kind of vibe of like pre-weirdness Twin Peaks, there's something very escapist and like idyllic about that kind of small town. And everyone in it is so fucking nice. Like, all of the characters are just lovely. There's one nasty guy, and then there's like a big shadowy evil corporation who are sort of absurdly evil. But even they don't really they have sort of representative, but she's like a low-level person in the organization, so she doesn't really sort of carry the whole weight of the awful things they've done. And even the nasty guy is sort of you can like dig into his story and kind of get some sympathetic notes from him as well. And then everyone else is just a lovely person who is super nice to you. And it was just like the perfect balm for me. It was like a sort of warm bath for the brain, where it was escapist, but it also didn't feel saccharine. It wasn't, even though all these people are lovely, the game has a very sad energy to it. Like, you are someone who's coming out of a foster care system that hasn't treated you very well. You have some trauma in your past. I won't say what, because so there's a thing about it that the game's blurb itself will spoil for you. But I won't spoil it, because I didn't know it when I first played it, and I was glad not to know it. But there is a sadness that hangs over the whole game. And yet it's kind of a bittersweet sadness. It's about, it very much dwells on kind of the impression a good person leaves behind after they're gone, where you are, even though it's tragic that they're gone, you are spending all of your time kind of experiencing and coming to understand just how positive they were, and just what a great impression they left on everybody, and how much they meant to everyone. And it feels so this is made by Deck 9. It's not made by Don't Nod, who did the original, and it's incredible how well it fits the Life is Strange vibe. Like, if you're here for a Life is Strange game, you absolutely get a Life is Strange game, and it feels like that. But at the same time, it also feels a bit more, I'm trying not to say the word competent. Like, it's just like, I'm not speaking out of turn to say that the original Life is Strange had some dialogue that didn't feel entirely natural, right? Like, that was a take that a lot of people had. And this does, like, all of it just sounds right. It's not 100% naturalistic dialogue. It's still, dialogue from a drama, but it is just very, you don't bump on anything. Everything just sounds right and is pretty well written, and very well acted in most cases. Alex in particular is, I think, a brilliant performance, just completely natural and sympathetic, and you just like her so much, and everything she's going through feels so real. Yeah, it just strikes a really good tone. It's not much of a gamey game. It's very strange because your power, so the supernatural part of it, is that you can sense people's emotions and you kind of share them whether you want to or not. So if someone's very angry, like, you both sense that they're angry and also you will feel angry. And that is assigned to a trigger button where you hold it down and then you're like in emotions mode where people glow with the color that represents the emotion they're going through. But there's almost no gain to that. It's really, you just hold down that button and then you can interact with some things. Like, the way it'll work is that they glow that color, but also so will some objects in the world. And those are objects that kind of have some special emotional resonance for that person. So then you go and interact with it and you sense what they're feeling about that thing. And that's it. You just interact with all the things that are glowing and then you've done it. And so it's kind of weird that it's sort of, it's implemented in that way where it's a button you can press at any time. It almost feels like it's inviting gameplay, like, oh, this is going to be a thing where it's up to you to think of the right times to use this. But no, it's not. It's just, it's obvious when to use it, and you use it and you click on all the stuff and then you solve the person's problems. And then the actual kind of gamey side of it comes more into like the decisions you make. It's very much like a Telltale game, or a Quantic Dream game, where you make decisions and at the end of each chapter you're told the percentage of people who picked those things, and that's always very gratifying and very fascinating to see what other people picked. And I think it's a sign of a good one when my choices are quite unpopular. Like, if I'm making a lot of choices and it says like, well, 85% of people did not do that, that's actually a good sign, because I always think like, okay, you successfully got something quite personal out of me there. Like, you made me feel a certain way about the stuff that not everybody does. And yeah, it never examines the inherent problematicness of being able to basically mind read. Like, you can't read specific thoughts. Well, you kind of can at times. Like, you read emotions, and then the way those emotions are communicated to you is like, you'll interact with something and you'll kind of hear what the person feels about it. It doesn't really examine that or interrogate that. And also, there are times when you are offered the opportunity to like take people's emotions away. Like, if they're having a very bad emotion, there's an option to take it away. I never tried it because that just seemed deeply wrong to me. Like, I'm like, whoa, that is like way over the line. And in the game's defense, it was always presented as a big, serious choice. I don't know what happens if you do it. I don't know if I expect the game probably doesn't tut at you for it, because it's not that kind of game. It's really about like, whatever choice you make, we'll see that through in the most positive light we can, and give you a sort of resolution that fits what you're going for. But yeah, the game never forced me to do that, and I was glad it didn't. And it felt like a personal choice to make that. I think that was actually one of the ones where I was unpopular. I think there was a case where a lot of people did take that emotion away from somebody, and I chose not to. And at its best, it finds quite a good line on that, where you can sort of headcanon it into something that's more comfortable, where the way I think of it is really, Alex can kind of sense what they're feeling, and also kind of what they want from her, like what she could give them that would help them in their situation. And sometimes that is teased apart into mechanics and into puzzle logic of, this person is feeling X, what are you going to do to fix that? But at its best, it's more intuitive. It's more like, Alex will just make a choice that seems crazy to me, and it will work for that person because she is sensing their emotions. She knows what they're going through. I won't say any specifics, but there's a time when you're sort of trying to console someone who's grieving, and the choice Alex makes is something that I would have instinctively thought, like, boy, that could be really kind of triggering. Like, that seems really stepping on the toes of this person's emotions. But because of that supernatural power that she has, I think the game gets away with it, where it's like, okay, there's no way the game can ever communicate fully what she's experiencing here. And she is sensing that this person needs this, like, he sort of needs to be reminded in a certain way of the person he's lost, and it works for him. And that kind of mind reading feels in safer territory of just like, you sense what someone wants from you sense what would work, what would feel good for somebody, and you can do it. And that's another aspect of like why it's such a wholesome game, despite being quite a sad game, is that you are always kind of sensing people's pain and what they wish they were getting from other people. And and you can give it to them. And I think that's also like the biggest video game power fantasy for me. Like, I don't want to be able to kill like the 25 people that I can kill in Far Cry 6, but I would like to know what the fuck people want from me in the world.
Yeah.
And
What if
getting to be a
empathy
character who
was
can sense that.
useful?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's just a beautiful little like mood piece. It's the town is gorgeous, and the scenery is gorgeous, and you want to live there. I was interested to find out actually it's set in Colorado, and that is where the developers are from. So it's very kind of authentic to that location. They know what they're talking about, and yeah, just as that, it was kind of a perfect piece of escapism at a perfect time for me, and just really it was something I could immerse myself in completely. Took my mind off stuff, and always came away from it feeling kind of warmed.
That's lovely. I hadn't actually considered playing it. Now I am.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I think I straight up prefer it to the original Life is Strange. I think it's just better. I wanted to mention one more thing about it, which is that I haven't really explained like much about sort of what you're doing moment to moment. It does a great line in someone. I'll just give an example. There is a kid who wants to do a LARP, a live action role play, that other people in the town have been planning for him and putting a lot of prep. Again, everyone is fucking lovely. And he is, as it happens, when the time comes, he's very sad about something. And he's on the fence about whether he wants to go through with it. He kind of feels like he doesn't really want to be the center of attention. And so you kind of, you can try and talk him into it or go along with that. But if you do the LARP, it is an incredibly lavish rendition of this, because you're sort of an empath. You are inside his head. You're sort of seeing things the way a child's imagination sees it when you are leaning into a kid's fantasies and validating all of the daydreams that he has. And so you kind of see all of the town as a fantasy landscape, and the people who are pretending to be monsters, you see them as actual monsters, and there are like proper battle mechanics and stuff, and you gain new abilities, and you can like level them up, and you're choosing damage over time spells or buffing different people in your party. It's just so wildly over the top in terms of like the effort they must have put in to make all this stuff work just for this one scene where this kid wants to do a LARP, and so the mechanics of an RPG make sense, so they just go to town on it. And it's also like visually gorgeous. The sort of effects and stuff they do to make this feel magical to a child is amazing.
Sounds good. Sounds extremely good.
There's one last game on the list, and it's mine, and there's no elegant segue here. There just really isn't. There is no elegant segue from this lovely empathetic game about bringing, in this particular case, a child's fantastical or imaginative investment in their environment to life, and screaming and decapitation simulator chivalry 2. That just there is. I mean, if maybe the segue is this: a 34-year-old man, occasionally need to be whisked away to a fantasy land where you can press V to bellow at any time, and you spend a lot of it getting your lower leg cut off by a wiggling man with a two-handed greatsword. But
it's a LARP of sorts.
It is. But isn't it all? If you think about it. Chivalry 2 is genuinely one of my favorite games of the year. And certainly probably my favorite competitive multiplayer game that was released this year, with a few honorable mentions elsewhere. And I won't maybe spend too much time on it, because it's the joy of it is really in its simplicity and a mixture of things. Obviously, I love my first-person melee games. I love my Mordhau. It is a less dense and simulatory take on first-person sword fighting than Mordhau, but better calibrated for large-scale battles. And but it still works at the duel level. It still works at the sort of lower level, kind of just having a scrap mode. And honestly, like, that kind of specific kind of medieval ultra violence is something that makes me happy. And I can't really point to why, but I think it's a combination of it's the tone that they strike in these games, and as hostile, Mordhau can be one of the worst places on earth in terms of internet kind of bottom of the barrel memes and stuff. Really, really can be. Um, but there's something kind of exuberantly silly about what these games, or specifically Chivalry 2, has done to the notion of like medieval warfare, that turns the whole thing into this ludicrous Monty Python pantomime where limbs are flying off left and right and people are being bloodily decapitated and falling over and screaming and shouting "My Lord" at one another in a way that I find enormously charming, and that sort of and it elevates everything else that happens and the kind of slapstick action of it, and the genuine kind of fun of pushing an objective or breaking through enemy lines or trying to hold back an enemy force as it storms your castle, that just sort of exists in this sort of like space of like pure kind of like fun multiplayer play for me. And I think I've made this comparison maybe before with regards to Mordhau, but I feel about this way about Chivalry as well, particularly the new one, which is that playing Chivalry feels like it feels like being in a playground more than anything else. For all the kind of the violence and the kind of the supposed realism of it, it feels like a big, slightly too violent playground game is being played, and everyone is sort of in on the same page about this. That like there's a certain amount of winning and losing, but there's also a lot of shoving and sort of falling down and getting back up again and falling in a hole, and that's very funny. And it sits on some part of the multiplayer design spectrum between like a pure sort of more pure kind of competitive multiplayer experience like Halo, for example, which has its slapstick elements. Maybe Halo's a bad example for that reason. Call of Duty, for example, on one end, and like a pure kind of slapstick party game like Gang Beasts or something like that on the other end. And in the middle, you have this daft medieval warfare simulator with its stupid speeches and its daft weapons and its ability to sit on a throne for no reason in a particular map, and these weird little Easter eggs and shortcuts and traps and daft scenarios that I just find enormously enjoyable, and like I think the new one does a really good job of bringing out the best of that model very consistently. I genuinely don't know if I have tons more to say about it than that, other than like you just sometimes fun is being chased by a screaming man with an axe.
Bellowing man with wanting to shove you.
Yeah. And that's it, really. It's Chivalry 2. It's real good. I think, if I've sort of identified that Valheim produced most of my favorite cooperative experiences this year, I think in terms of new games, particularly Chivalry is way up there in terms of competitive multiplayer for me. In terms of just, it's also a great balance of, it's a game where you can try hard, and it's also a game where you can have a lot of fun not trying very hard, which makes it a very good hangout game as well. Good thing to do while, running around with a friend, trying not to get decapitated, really.
Isn't that what we're all trying to do?
It is, yeah. But that actually brings us to the the end of the formal list. I think what I would like us to do now is go around the table, such as it is, and first up, call out any honourable mentions. We probably can't go deep on them, but it would be good to call out other games because I've certainly got a couple. And then maybe after we've done that, each settle on an actual game of the year, and we'll see if that produces a result.
Let's
or
try
if,
that.
as is more likely, it produces 3 different games. So yeah, Alex, what would you say were your honourable mentions this year? Games that came out this year that maybe didn't make the final list, but you would like to kind of give a shout out to?
Yeah, I've actually got quite a few. Demon Souls.
Mm-hmm.
The stones look nice. Groniads of the Galaxy.
Yep.
They talk a lot, but somehow I don't hate it. Psychonauts 2, which I kind of want it to be higher in my list, and I just don't know. It's good.
Yeah,
it's really nice. It's lovely.
How far
but
did
it's
you get with it?
I don't know. I don't know how far I'm in. Like halfway. I don't know. I've played quite a few hours, but it's nice.
It's an honourable mention from me too, and the main reason it's not higher is I just haven't played enough of it. I'm only sort of like in the second chapter-ish.
Yeah, I think I'm not far off that. Rift Wizard, I mean, I think it's a prime Tom game, and he hasn't played it yet.
Looking
But
forward
it
to this.
is a wizard simulator, and it is good. Allegia, which is a sort of side on, it's like a platform sort of fighty game, story game about men at sea and being ninjas. It's good. Yignet, which is
Oh
a
yeah.
really nice abstract musical platformer abstracty game, which is really lovely. And maybe I should have promoted it a little bit higher because it really is just a lovely game. It's quite short. It does its small thing incredibly well, and I recommend it. I think that's enough. That's enough.
Nice. Tom, how about you?
Slipways, which I've talked about on the podcast before. My opinion on it hasn't changed. I actually also haven't played it much since I last talked about it, so it's a thing that it's obsessed me for many an hour, both in the Pico 8 version originally and then the gorgeous version that is out on Steam now. It's a really elegant pared down 4X game that is all about trading and creating trade routes, and it invites really deep thought about how to set things up, and it's very, very satisfying, very addictive. I think I've kind of run my course with it now, so that's why it's not higher on my list. Far Cry 6, which is another boringly good game. It's very much like Hitman 3 in the sense that I had some great times with it. Some of the outposts are fantastic. So by rights, it probably should have been one of my main choices. The only reason it's not is that everything that's different about it versus previous Far Cries is kind of a step back, I think. Like, very little that they changed is better. Most of what they changed is either just different and not better, or it's different and worse. So it's very hard to reward that. It's very hard to be like champion in Far Cry 6. The one thing that's better than Far Cry 5 is the setting is way more interesting, and it's a lovely place to explore.
Yes.
Subnautica Below Zero, I got pretty into this. I actually really loved it. It reminded me of all the reasons that I loved Subnautica originally. It just isn't very different to Subnautica, which is fine, but I sort of hit a point where like the scariness and the dauntingness of it all was just enough that I stopped playing it for like a week or so. And really, I stopped playing it forever because when I came back to it, like just the other week, which is after like sort of 2 or 3 months gap, I just can't remember what the hell I was doing and where I was, so I can't get back into it now. So the game's kind of dead to me. Like, it's so hard to know where, like, what was I building? Like, what vehicles do I have access to and which do I not? Because in the first time through Subnautica, you would remember, because the things you don't know about. Whereas in an expansion, I know about everything pretty much, and I just don't know where I was in that curve. So that's kind of a sad end to that game. And I guess the Outer Wilds DLC, man, this could so easily have been literally my game of the year with no contest. It's called Echoes of the Eye, and it's the first sort of half of it is fucking amazing, and it's some of the best Outer Wilds has ever been. And then I can't actually recommend it because the back half just changes what the game is completely, and it's very challenging and very unpleasant to play. It's just a really punishing kind of challenge that they add that is not in line with the other stuff you've played in the Outer Wilds. And I don't like it at all, and it becomes very frustrating, and it's a really sad end because everything else about that DLC was so good. And is that it? I guess I'll just mention Griftlands. I haven't played it much this year at all, but that is a really interesting game that hit 1.0 this year, and is very interesting. I mean, should we say Inscription? Like, Inscription
on my
is
list.
like sort of okay. Yeah, I'll let you get to it.
Well, I mean, let's jump right into it. So, like, Inscription's on mine. It's in this list because I really admire it so far. I appreciate it, but also like I'm still working my way through it. So, and I feel like I can't have an opinion until I have finished it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I admire it. I think it's clever. I'm enjoying it. I'm not finding it very sticky. Like I'm kind of making myself play it because I kind of want to find out more. I don't know if that's gels with your experience, Tom.
It's very hard to sort of ask where you are without saying too much, so I won't. But yeah, it's a game of 3 parts, I would say, and the first part is the strongest by far. And yeah, it's another one where like the Outer Wilds DLC, it could so easily have been way up there. And I feel like it just kind of squanders its goodwill eventually. I think that's probably all I should say.
Also on my list, Resident Evil Village, which I did really like. I think it's got a lot to recommend it as a kind of, first person horror experiences, and really as a reboot of Resident Evil to the extent that it's that as well. It's real scary. It doesn't make it higher for me because I think it's ultimately quite by the numbers. Like I think its environments are beautiful and there's some great set pieces, but like I think that really is what it's that's what make it up, right? Like systemically, I didn't find it enormously interesting beyond that. Splitgate is on this list, and fighting for a position at the top. Yeah. Splitgate is just a game that I have a great time every single time I play it. This is the game that is somewhere between Halo and Portal. It's been overshadowed a little bit by Halo Infinite coming out and being like, yeah, this is, Splitgate is ultimately a little rough around the edges, and it doesn't feel quite as good as Halo, but the Portal stuff is super cool, and it shouldn't work, and it definitely does, and that's something that I really like about it, and it is honestly fighting out of this honorable mention slot into a higher position for me. If it just in terms of like, will I have a good time when I load this game? Yes. Does it have the most cursed character art of any game released in 2021? Also, yes. Like I hate the Garfield. I hate him, and I find him very compelling. And like,
makes no damn sense. It compels me though.
It does. Yeah. Like there's I play it with Paul, and both of our characters look like complete trash. Like I'm a big green samurai robot, and he is what I would only call like a kind of off-brand red Necron, and like or a Terminator, and we just look so naff. And like, but that in its way, it's kind of kitsch, and they're definitely not going for this, but they've ended up at like sort of crunchy JPEG Twitch, like it's like what if Drill designed all the characters in your video game. It's like the pitch, which is maybe the highest recommendation I could possibly give it, but not on purpose. Anyway, that's Splitgate. That game also makes me like borderline toxic, which is a new experience for me. Like I'm usually quite a wholesome person, and like there's like an element of like pure 16-year-old Chris that comes out playing Splitgate. That doesn't come out playing Halo either, which is weird. I think Splitgate plays into it because it literally has modes where like those like kill confirm team deathmatch variants where like you kill someone but they'll like drop a token that you've got to pick up, so you've got to confirm the kill, so it like forces close range engagements. That classic variant. Splitgate has that, but you have to teabag the body or it doesn't.
Yeah, I was going to
count.
mention this. I saw that the other day, and
it's a big yikes. It's a huge yikes, and yet in the actual game, I think because there's no real meaningful humanity and the awful fucking characters you're all playing, it gets away. Maybe it only gets away with it for me, someone who is not like necessarily going to be upset. I actually, which is weird because I fucking hate teabagging as a phenomenon, and I don't think it's excusable. And I think in other games it's like an instant ban, whereas in this I was being chased around by a man dressed as fucking Garfield, whose name was Anakin Skywalker, and I was like, not today. And I used a portal to get behind him, and then I stole his points, and that felt amazing. So who am I to judge? A person with a brain, allegedly, is the answer to that question. I was going to keep talking. So yeah, it's a weird fucking game, but I do have a good time every time I play it. Also on this list, Forza, the new one, 5, I think, which I enjoyed. A racing game. I don't care about cars, but I liked it. And then finally, actually, a game that is a very recent arrival as of the last couple of days, but maybe the most important game released this year, Super Auto Pets, which, if you haven't heard of it, is a very lightweight auto battler, like somewhere between an auto battler and like Hearthstone's arena mode, where the cast of characters is exclusively made up of animal emojis. It's got some real Flash game energy, and you make a lineup of little animals. Otherwise, it's an auto battler. They kick the shit out of each other in a line. but there's lots of stacked little, buffs and dependencies, and so emerging some classic combos, like the elephant, when it attacks, throws a rock behind it, hurting whatever animal is behind it in your lineup, but the peacock gets more powerful every time it takes damage. So when a peacock behind an elephant, that's a classic combo. However, the camel, when that takes damage, it buffs the one behind it. So an elephant behind a camel in front of a peacock, incredible. Just off the chain. Some amazing combat. You give a little hot jar of honey to a badger, that'll fuck up anyone at the end of your lineup. I'm losing my voice. And then the other reason I would recommend it, it's also completely free. It's like a 40 meg download, and I've played. I think Pip introduced it to me like the other night, and then I played it till like 2 a.m. The other reason I would recommend Super Auto Pets, and this may even be the game of the year, is because whenever you buy an animal and add it to your lineup, it plays like whatever stock audio was available for whatever noise that animal makes. Oink, oink for the pig, a kind of dolphin chitter, a woof for the dog, and so on. However, as is scientifically the case, giraffes are incapable of making sound. I never really appreciated this. Their necks are too long. They cannot make sound. They are mute animals. If you didn't know giraffes were mute, now you do. And so when you buy a giraffe in the game, a woman says giraffe, and that is one of my favorite bits of problem solving.
Yeah, just fucking go for it.
Yeah, exactly. Just say the word. Like we could have just not had a sound, but they committed, and for that reason, it gets the very least into honorable mentions. Yeah. Okay. Let's bring this thing all the way.
Oh no.
To land, Alex.
Yes.
Yeah. Make a choice, Alex. Pick a game.
Fuck's sakes.
Pick a game and marry it.
I'm not going first. You can go first.
We can do
Chris.
we can do the like ordering at a restaurant rule where if someone's decided, they go first.
Okay. Have you decided, Tom?
Yeah, I have actually.
Okay.
I've changed my mind. I went into this podcast thinking I was going to say Hitman 3, and in the course of talking about it, I persuaded myself that actually Life is Strange True Colors is my game of the year.
Hey.
Just less boring, less boringly good, and more interestingly quite good. No, it was just like it was the game I needed this year, and I feel like actually genuinely grateful to it, which is not something I often feel to video games. And I think just that is a pretty high calling for a video game to fulfill, to be what someone needs emotionally, and to fill that box and just make you feel better.
Nice. I also came into this expecting to say Hitman 3, and I'm not going to say Hitman 3. So bad news, IO, for making an amazing game that we decided to make different decisions about. I'm going to say Valheim this year.
Wow.
And the reason for that is similar in that I'm looking at this list, and I think there are games on this list that I can identify that like I've had a really amazing time with. I have felt that this game, there isn't really like a clear, this year at least, there isn't a really clear standout winner. Like if I was talking about like, because the game, to that point, Tom, like the game that was sort of the game I needed when I needed it really was Cyberpunk this year. So, and that was obviously came out last year. So, but I'll say Valheim because I think, to be personal for a moment, I feel like this last 6 months, particularly, 6 months plus of the pandemic, has been like it's gotten into the point where the sort of the social measures and safety nets that we all kind of cobbled together in the first half started to fall apart, basically, at least for me, in terms of people's energy levels, in terms of ability to kind of spend time with people. And part of that's just being really busy as well. And Valheim for me sits in a very fond space at the beginning of the year, where it was a meaningful new phase in like pandemic era online socializing for me, and all my favorite, many of my favorite moments or little projects or kind of multiplayer kind of experiences this year have arisen from it. And that I think is what clinches it for me. And it's the same logic in a way. It's less about what was on paper the best game and more about where the most meaningful experience came from, I think.
It's time, Alex.
Also Valheim.
Oh,
pretty much the same. Like for the good times we had. For the good times we had.
You voted for the good times. And who could blame you? I mean, I guess that means it technically wins, but given that we don't have the whole group to vote, then why don't they all win? especially Super Auto Pets, the game of 2021. I suppose that's that then, isn't it?
That is that.
Yeah.
We've ended this year.
Bumpy,
ended
weird year.
Yeah. I'm a bumpy, weird man, and so really, it's my time. um, so some housekeeping, I guess. So as we said at the beginning of the podcast, this will be the last episode for 2021. We're going to take a little bit of a break now. We'll be back in the new year. We should have, really thinking about it, had a conversation about when that will be prior to this podcast, but there's no point having it now live on air. So we will give you a heads up when to expect the normal service to resume. In the meantime, obviously, I hope everyone has a lovely break. Looking forward to finding out communities' various goatees from the year, because that's always a highlight.
Yeah. Is that ongoing? Like, is the process
I
underway?
don't know. I hope it happens again, but I don't want to force it to happen because, if
That would
it
be
does,
bad.
amazing.
That would be wild.
Yeah, that would be a wild thing. That would be a strange thing for me to insist upon. But nonetheless, looking forward to hearing people's experiences anyway. And the other thing is, obviously, in the last couple of months, we've been, we changed up the format of the podcast. And so I would appreciate over the break knowing if this new format is working for you, like the 2 weeks on sort of on the main pod and then the lock-ins on the off weeks. That is a very good use of the email address questions@crateandcrowbar.com. However, in this case, the question is mine. So really, it's like answers at. But don't email that because it's not real. Yeah, and so I think that's probably us done for the year in that case. If you, sorry, Alex, you were going to say? No, you just did the big inhale.
I did. I was getting ready to say goodbye or something.
But I haven't
like
done
that.
the outro. I've done the outro, Alex.
Oh God.
I did some housekeeping. You confused the housekeeping for the outro. It's a classic. It's a classic. But I appreciate your state of readiness. If you would like to find a podcast like this, but on YouTube, you can find us at youtube.com/Crate and Crowbar. We've got a website at Crate and Crowbar where you'll find a link to our Discord server, which is where people hang out and share their thoughts and feelings on thing of video game. You can also find us on Twitter at Crate and Crowbar. And a huge thank you to everyone who has supported us on Patreon this year. If you'd like to find out more about supporting the podcast, particularly through the changes that we've undergone, you can find out more about that at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. I might endeavor to use part of this forthcoming break to actually update a bunch of those materials to make sure they're more accurate than they currently are. I've said this on air now, which I'm going to regret when I don't do those things. but sometimes you just got to make things spicy for yourself. I have been Chris Thurston. Who are you?
I have been recently Tom Francis. Bye.
I continue to be Alex Wilshire.
Ooh, it's kind of a
Thanks.
Oh
no, I started too soon. I thought we were there. We're not there.
I was about to say we had a kind of like there's a slightly sort of marshmallowy energy to this outro, and I was going to hang a lampshade on this, but you got right in there, so I'm not going to talk over you any longer.
Well, now I'm not going first.
All right.
Thanks
for listening, everybody. Oof. Merry Christmas.
And that.
And that